It wasn't supposed to be like this. A simple weekend getaway, just the four of us, miles away from city noise and stress. Unplugging, unwinding, and spending time together before life scattered us in different directions. No phones, no responsibilities. Just nature, a few beers, and a campfire under the stars. The drive was full of the usual road trip banter. Aaron telling dumb jokes, Zoe singing off-key to the radio, and Mia laughing, her head resting against the window. I was behind the wheel, focusing on the winding road as the trees began to thicken, their branches arching over us like a canopy. We were heading to an off-the-grid spot Aaron had found, deep in the woods. A place he'd been talking up for weeks. "No one goes up there," he said, almost boasting. "It's perfect. Total isolation." I wasn't sure about that. I liked my nature with a hint of civilization nearby. A place where if something went wrong, help wouldn't be a long hike away. But Aaron was excited, so we all went along with it. So, Zoe piped up from the back seat as we turned onto an unmarked dirt road. "This spot isn't like haunted or anything, right?" Aaron grinned. "I mean, who knows? The woods are old. Anything could be out here." Mia shot him a look. "Can we not start with that stuff yet? Let's just enjoy the weekend before you start freaking everyone out." I chuckled. "Don't worry, we'll save the ghost stories for the campfire." I glanced around. The stillness of the forest was unsettling. No birds, no rustling leaves, just silence. Zoe and Mia grabbed their backpacks, but I hesitated a moment, a strange weight settling in my chest as I stared down the narrow trail that led into the woods. I forced a smile, pushing the feeling away. The hike was harder than expected. The trail was barely visible beneath the overgrowth, and as we trudged deeper, the trees closed in, casting long shadows despite the early evening sun. Aaron led the way, cutting through the brush with confidence, while Zoe and Mia stuck close together behind him, whispering about how creepy the woods felt. I brought up the rear, keeping an eye on the trail behind us, an odd sense of being followed creeping over me. But every time I looked back, the path was empty. The tension was subtle at first. A strange quietness in the air, an absence of animal sounds that grew more noticeable the further we walked. And then there were the trees, towering, ancient things, their bark blackened in patches, their limbs twisting in unnatural shapes. After about an hour, we reached the clearing. It was just as Aaron had promised, isolated, untouched, with a makeshift fire pit in the center. But something about the place felt wrong, as if it had been abandoned long ago for reasons no one had bothered to share. "All right," Aaron clapped his hands. "This is it." Mia hesitated at the edge of the clearing, her eyes darting around. "I don't know. It feels weird here." "Weird how?" Zoe asked, setting her bag down next to the fire pit. Mia shrugged, chewing on her lip. "I don't know, like we're not supposed to be here." I felt it too. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as if something unseen was pressing down on us. But I didn't want to say anything. Aaron had been so excited about this trip, and I didn't want to be the one to ruin it. As we set up camp, the lights started to fade. The sun dipped below the tree line, casting long, eerie shadows that stretched across the clearing. I lit the fire, the flickering flames casting a dim orange glow, but it did little to chase away the feeling of being watched. We ate quietly, the usual banter from the car ride absent. Zoe picked at her food, her gaze darting to the tree line every few minutes, and Mia sat closer to me than usual, her legs tucked underneath her, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Why is it so quiet?" Mia asked after a long stretch of silence. "Shouldn't we hear animals or something?" Aaron shrugged. "Maybe they don't come around here." Zoe scoffed. "Gee, that's comforting." The fire crackled, sending sparks up into the darkening sky. We sat in a circle, the shadows around us deepening as the night settled in. It was too quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed in on you, making you feel like you had to whisper just to avoid disturbing something that was listening. I tried to shake it off, but that creeping feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me alone. Every time I glanced at the tree line, I swore I saw movement. Just beyond the firelight, something shifting between the trees. But when I focused, there was nothing. Just darkness. We sat around the fire, trying to keep up a conversation, but every now and then we'd fall into an uneasy silence, as if waiting for something. Mia clutched my arm, her face pale in the firelight. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, something's off." Zoe was the first to suggest we head to the tents, clearly unnerved by the atmosphere. But Aaron wouldn't have it. "We're not running off to bed scared of nothing," he said, standing up and stretching. "It's just the woods. You guys are letting it get to you." But even Aaron wasn't his usual cocky self. His laughter was forced, his eyes flickering nervously toward the trees. And then it happened. It was faint at first. Just a whisper. Soft. Almost like the wind, but too deliberate, too low. I thought it was my imagination until I saw Mia freeze beside me, her eyes widening. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, clutching my arm tighter. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Aaron frowned. "Hear what?" "Shush," Zoe said, holding up her hand. "Listen." We went quiet, straining to hear. The fire crackled softly, and in the distance, that whisper came again. Closer this time. "What the hell?" Aaron muttered, finally dropping his bravado. He grabbed his flashlight and flicked it on, shining it toward the trees. Nothing. "Maybe it's just the wind," Zoe said, but her voice shook. "Right." The whisper came again, louder now, and this time it wasn't alone. There were footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the underbrush just beyond the tree line. Aaron swung the flashlight toward the sound, but the beam cut through only empty air. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, cold sweat beading on my forehead. "Okay, this isn't funny," Aaron said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who's out there?" No answer. Then, out of nowhere, we heard a snap. A loud crack of branches breaking. Something was moving toward us, fast. Zoe screamed, stumbling back from the fire, her hands covering her mouth. "We need to go, now." But we were frozen, paralyzed by the growing dread that something was watching us. Something that wasn't human. The footsteps stopped right at the edge of the clearing. We all stared, holding our breath, waiting for something to emerge. But nothing came. Aaron gripped the flashlight so hard his knuckles turned white. "Whoever's out there, this isn't funny. Show yourself." Silence. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat had gone dry. My heart pounded in my ears, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the footsteps continued, but they were circling us now, moving quickly around the edge of the clearing, just out of sight. Every now and then, the beam of Aaron's flashlight would catch a glimpse of something. A shadow, a figure darting between the trees. But it was always gone before we could fully see it. And then, the whispering returned. Mia clung to me, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "We have to leave, please." But Aaron stood his ground, shining the flashlight wildly into the darkness. "No, we're not running, whoever it is. They're messing with us." I wasn't so sure. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, overlapping, swirling around us. It was like a chorus of voices, soft at first, but quickly growing more insistent, more frantic. I couldn't make out the words, but they felt wrong. Foreign, twisted, like a language that didn't belong here. Zoe was sobbing now, backing away toward the tents. "Please, can we go?" Aaron didn't answer. He was staring into the darkness, his face pale as the whispers grew louder. He dropped the flashlight, and it flickered before going out completely, plunging us into near darkness. And then we saw it. Just at the edge of the clearing, standing between the trees, was a figure. Tall, gaunt, its skin pale as moonlight. Its eyes, they were wrong, hollow, dark pits that seemed to suck in the light. It stood there, motionless, watching us. We couldn't move, couldn't scream. We were frozen, locked in its gaze as the whispers swelled around us. Then, without warning, it moved. One long, slow step into the clearing, and another. Its limbs bent at strange angles, jerking unnaturally as it approached, and the closer it got, the colder the air became. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind screaming at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot. Mia was trembling beside me, tears streaming down her face. Zoe was mumbling something under her breath, backing away slowly. Aaron finally broke the silence, his voice barely a whisper. We need to run." But it was too late. The figure lunged toward us, and in that moment, everything broke. We scattered, tripping over each other as we sprinted toward the tents. I heard Mia screaming behind me, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't look back. I dove into the tent, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the zipper, sealing myself inside. Outside, the whispers grew louder, surrounding us, pressing in from all sides. I could hear Aaron shouting, Zoe crying, but I didn't dare leave the tent. And then, the whispers stopped. Silence. I waited, heart racing, barely breathing. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Finally, I unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The clearing was empty, but something was wrong. The fire. It was out. The air was colder than before, and a thick fog had settled over the clearing. And then I realized I couldn't hear Aaron or Zoe. Panic set in. I crawled out of the tent, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps as I frantically looked around. And then I saw it, Aaron's flashlight lying in the dirt, flickering faintly. But Aaron was gone.